My 7-year-old daughter stood in front of a crowded holiday table wearing the sparkly gold dress she had picked out herself. The fabric shimmered under the glow of chandeliers, but her little hands trembled as they gripped a small box wrapped in red paper. Around her, adults clinked glasses, laughter bubbling like champagne foam, too distracted to notice her. But I noticed. I always noticed. I. She looked at her grandmother, my husband's mother, and spoke clearly in a voice that somehow carried across the room. "Grandma," she said, lifting the box slightly, "Dad told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." The room froze. Forks hovered midair, music dwindled to a ghost of itself, and every eye shifted toward the small girl holding her ground. Lorraine, my mother-in-law, gave a tight, brittle smile as if it were all a joke. But when she opened the lid, the sound that tore from her throat was no laughter. It was a scream, sharp, guttural, louder than the carols still playing faintly in the background. Gasps erupted. People rushed closer. Chairs scraped against hardwood, but I didn't need to look inside the box. I already knew what was there. My husband had prepared it months ago, waiting for this day. And now it had arrived. To explain how we got to this moment, I have to go back. When I first married Travis, I thought I was stepping into a big, warm family. They were the kind of people who filled weekends with barbecues and holidays with noisy gatherings. Lorraine, his mother, stood at the center of it all. She had a voice that could silence a room and opinions that always seemed to end arguments rather than invite them. I admired her at first. I even longed for her approval, hoping she'd see me as part of her circle. In the early days, she smiled at me, complimented my cooking, and hugged me goodbye. It was easy to believe I belonged, but little cracks appeared soon after. She left me off family group texts. She remarked on how I wasn't like the women in their family, how my background and values were different. The slights were small, plausible as oversights, but I felt their sting. Then came my daughter Zia. She was 2 years old when Travis came into our lives, a bright little soul from my first marriage. Travis never hesitated. He adored her from the start. He taught her how to ride a bike, read bedtime stories, and eventually adopted her legally. In our home, step was a word we never used. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. But Lorraine never accepted that. At first, she pretended. She sent birthday cards, brought small gifts, but the difference was always clear. Zia wasn't invited to cousin sleepovers. She didn't get the matching Christmas pajamas Lorraine ordered for the other grandchildren. While Maddie was called Princess and Jonah got the newest sports gear, Zia was handed trinkets, plastic toys, or generic books. She noticed. Children always notice. I tried to soften it. I told her maybe Grandma forgot, that love isn't measured in gifts. But each year it got harder to explain. At Thanksgiving, Lorraine handed out hand-painted plates with each grandchild's name in gold. Zia's spot was set with a spare plate pulled from the back of the cabinet. That night she whispered to me, "Maybe she thinks I'm just visiting." I had no answer. I only saw Travis's jaw clench, his silence heavy. We kept showing up to the gatherings. I told myself it was for the bigger picture, for family unity, for traditions, for memories with cousins. I convinced myself silence was strength. But what I was really teaching my daughter was that being treated as less was something to endure quietly. Lorraine's favoritism became impossible to ignore. Last Christmas, she gave Maddie a new iPad, Jonah a fat envelope of cash, and Zia a lavender candle with a tag that read, "To Travis's girl." I felt my stomach drop as I watched my daughter's face shudder. She didn't cry, she didn't complain, but she folded inward, retreating. Travis stared at the floor silent, and I knew he hadn't forgotten the box he had prepared, the one he'd given to Zia for the day Lorraine went too far. That night in the car, Zia held the candle on her lap. Her voice was small when she asked, "Is Grandma mad at me?" Travis finally spoke. "No, sweetheart. Grandma just forgot something important. But I think she's about to remember." He glanced at the little red box she now held. She nodded, determination shining where hurt had been. "I want to give it to her tomorrow," she said. And that's how we came to this moment, my daughter standing tall in her gold dress, handing her grandmother the truth, wrapped in paper and ribbon. What was inside that box would tear the mask off every polite smile, every hollow toast, every fake semblance of love. this family had been clinging to. The scream still echoed in the rafters when the room surged toward Lorraine. She dropped the lid, hands shaking, her wine glass toppling onto the white tablecloth. Burgundy spread like blood across linen, seeping into untouched plates of roast and potatoes. Inside the box lay three things. A framed photo of Travis holding Zia on the day the adoption papers were finalized. The certificate itself folded neatly beneath, and a letter in Travis's handwriting. Lorraine's hands hovered as if touching them might scorch her. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp, trembling. Travis rose slowly from his chair, his face set, eyes steady. "It's proof. Proof that Zia is my daughter. Proof that she has been from the moment I signed those papers and from long before that in every way that matters." Gasps whispered through the room. Cousins craned their necks, aunts covered their mouths. Lorraine's lips curled as though she'd bitten something sour. This stunt at Christmas. How dare you?" Zia pressed herself against my side, but she didn't cry. Her little chin lifted brave. Travis crossed the room, each step heavy with years of silence breaking. He picked up the photo, holding it out so everyone could see. "This was the happiest day of my life," he said, his voice firm. "Not because of a piece of paper, but because it meant no one could ever say she wasn't my child. Except you, Mom. You've spent years treating her like a guest at her own family's table." Lorraine's cheeks blazed. "I've treated her kindly." "No," I cut in, my voice shaking. "You gave every other grandchild a seat in your heart. You left her scraps and expected her to be grateful. You don't get to rewrite this, Lorraine, not anymore." The room fell into a hush. For years I had swallowed my anger, smoothed over the hurt for the sake of peace. But the sight of my daughter's small body braced against me, of her courage in standing there with that box, pulled the words from me like fire from flint. She asked me once, I continued, my throat raw, "If you thought she was just visiting. She's 7 years old. Do you have any idea what it does to a child to feel disposable in her own family?" Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Maddie's mother stared at her lap. Jonah fiddled with his napkin. The truth was too heavy to look at directly, but it filled every corner of the room. Travis placed the adoption certificate on the table in front of his mother. "You can't ignore this anymore. She is my daughter, your granddaughter. And if you can't see that, then you don't deserve her." Lorraine's eyes flashed, but her voice faltered. "You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." "You embarrassed yourself," Travis said simply. Zia looked up at him, then her eyes wide and shining. "Daddy," she whispered. He crouched beside her, cupping her cheek. "Yes, sweetheart. Am I really yours forever?" Tears slipped down his face, but his smile was steady. "Forever and always. No one can change that." The room was silent, except for the carols still faintly playing in the background. I felt the air shift, brittle walls of pretense cracking around us. Some relatives turned away from Lorraine, their loyalty no longer unshakable. Others whispered, uncomfortable, unsure. Lorraine's hands trembled as she pushed the box away, as though it burned to be near her. "You've ruined Christmas," she hissed. "No," I said, holding Zia close. "You've been ruining it for years. Today we're just telling the truth." The chandelier light glittered across the framed photo, casting it in gold. My daughter, dressed in her gold party dress, stood taller somehow, no longer the forgotten child at the edge of the room. For once, the laughter wasn't at her expense. For once, silence worked in her favor. But I knew this wasn't over. Lorraine wasn't a woman who surrendered easily. And whatever she did next would test whether we had truly freed ourselves or only cracked open a deeper war. The silence hung so heavy you could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Then Lorraine straightened, smoothing the wrinkles from her blouse, as if the act could press the chaos back into order. Her voice, sharp and cold, cut through the air. "You think waving a piece of paper makes her mine?" she snapped. "Blood doesn't lie. You can't change what she is." Gasps rippled across the table. Zia stiffened against me, her little hand clutching my dress so tightly I felt the fabric strain. I bent, whispering into her hair, "You are everything, sweetheart. Don't listen." But inside, rage coiled, hot and suffocating. Travis stood firm. "Enough, Mom. That girl has more heart and courage than anyone at this table. She's family whether you bless it or not." Lorraine's eyes glittered with something fierce, almost desperate. She slapped her palm against the table, rattling silverware. "If you want to talk about truth," she said, her voice rising. Then let's tell all of it. Do you really think you were your father's perfect son? Do you really think your life has been so pure? The room bristled, shocked murmurs buzzing like flies. Travis stiffened, his jaw tightening. Don't he warned? But Lorraine only leaned forward, her face pale with fury. Your father left because of you, not me, not anyone else. You were reckless. You nearly destroyed everything with your drinking, your gambling. He couldn't stand to watch you throw your life away. Travis's face drained of color. His hand dropped to his side, limp as though she'd struck him. I felt the ground tilt, the air spin. My husband, who had stood by me, stood for Zia, looked suddenly like the boy I'd never met, caught in shame he had buried. It's not true, he whispered, but his voice cracked. The room was transfixed. Some guests turned away, embarrassed to be witnesses. Others stared, hungry for spectacle. Lorraine's words slithered like poison, twisting the knife where she knew it would cut deepest. I wanted to shout to defend him, but I knew better than to fling truth against her rage in the middle of this battlefield. Instead, I reached for his hand under the table, squeezing hard. His eyes met mine, stormy and broken, and I nodded. You are not alone. But Lorraine wasn't finished. And now you parade this girl around this charity case as if she makes you noble. All it makes you is weak. Zia let out a small sound, a gasp, half-choked sob, and I felt something inside me snap. I pushed back my chair, the legs screeching against the wood. My voice, sharp and trembling, cut across the hall. Stop it, enough. The room froze. I had been the quiet one for years, the peacekeeper, the one who swallowed and smiled. But not tonight. I stood holding Zia's shoulders in my hands. You can throw every insult you want at me, at Travis, at anyone here. But you will not ever call my daughter less than family. Not again, not while I breathe. My voice cracked, but I pressed on louder, fiercer. Do you hear me? She has sat at your table year after year, waiting for your love, waiting for even a crumb of kindness. And every time you passed her by, you carved scars into her heart. But tonight we end it. Tonight she hears the truth. She is loved. She is ours. She is enough. The chandelier light gleamed in Zia's teary eyes as she looked up at me. Really, Mama? I pulled her close, kissing her hair. Really, baby. More than enough. Travis rose, then his shoulders shaking, but his voice finding strength again. You want to shame me with the past, Mom? Fine. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. But Zia saved me. Being her father saved me. So if you think you can tear us apart with old ghosts, you're wrong. We're stronger because of them. The room erupted, some clapping hesitantly, some whispering, some slipping away to the kitchen to escape the storm. Lorraine sat, rigid lips pressed, fury blazing but cornered. For the first time her power faltered. I knew this wasn't the final battle. Not with her. But something had shifted. The truth was out, and no amount of denial could stuff it back into silence. That night would mark the beginning of the end for her reign, for the lies, for the careful facade of a family that had looked whole while rotting at the core. For a moment, Lorraine just sat there, her shoulders stiff, her eyes darting around the table as though searching for someone to back her up. For years she had wielded her authority like a scepter. No one dared contradict her. No one dared expose the fractures she tried to wallpaper over with lavish dinners and expensive gifts. But tonight the mask was cracking. And then, to everyone's shock, it was her own brother, Uncle Martin, who rose from his seat at the far end of the table. He was a quiet man, rarely speaking at gatherings, more comfortable with his pipe and books than family theatrics. But now his voice carried across the hall, steady and grave. Lorraine, he said, shaking his head slowly enough, you've taken this too far. Her head whipped toward him, disbelief flashing across her face. Martin, don't you dare! But he held up his hand firm. I've watched you do this for years. To her he gestured, at me, to Travis, to that little girl. His eyes softened as they landed on Zia. I kept my silence because I thought it wasn't my place. But silence is what's allowed this poison to spread through our family. I won't be complicit anymore. The room fell into stunned stillness. Lorraine's cheeks flushed crimson. You think you know better than me how to run this family? She hissed. No, Martin said simply. But I know cruelty when I see it. And I know love when I see it too. That child is loved. That's all that matters. Tears stung my eyes as Zia looked at him wide-eyed, like someone had just cracked open a window in a room long sealed shut. For the first time, she saw someone else stand for her, someone not her parents, someone from within the family she'd been trying so desperately to belong to. Lorraine slammed her fist against the table. "You're all turning against me after everything I've done." "What you've done," Travis said quietly, "is confuse control for love. They're not the same." Voices began to murmur around the table. A cousin whispered, "He's right." Another aunt nodded, eyes downcast. One by one, shoulders shifted, eyes turned away from Lorraine. The empire she had built on fear and obligation was beginning to crumble. She stood abruptly, her chair clattering backward. "Fine," she spat, her voice brittle with rage. "If you all want to coddle her, then go ahead. But don't expect me to sit here and play along." She grabbed her coat from the back of her chair, but before she could storm out, Zia's small voice rang across the hall. "Grandma!" The single word stopped her cold. Lorraine turned stiff, her eyes narrowing. Zia stood beside me, her golden dress shimmering, her little fists clenched at her sides. "You don't have to like me," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "But you don't get to make me feel like I don't belong. I belong to my dad. I belong to my mom. And that's enough." The hall went so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the lights. Lorraine's mouth opened, then closed again, as if she had no language for being confronted by a child's truth. Uncle Martin nodded, his voice solemn. "Out of the mouths of babes, Lorraine. Perhaps you should listen." Something in Lorraine's face flickered. Shame, regret, maybe just exhaustion, but she swallowed it down, shaking her head. "You'll regret this," she muttered, her voice weaker now. "All of you." She turned and stalked out, the heavy oak door slamming behind her. The sound echoed like a final gavel sealing what had just unfolded. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, people began to shift. An aunt walked over and hugged me tightly, whispering, "I'm sorry I never spoke up." A cousin crouched to smile at Zia, telling her she was brave. The tide was turning, not perfectly, not fully, but enough to tell me the walls were falling. Travis pulled Zia into his arms, holding her close. "I've never been prouder," he whispered against her hair. And as I looked around the room at the fractured but shifting faces of a family long bound by silence, I realized something vital: we had broken the cycle. Lorraine's shadow no longer loomed the way it once had. But I also knew this wasn't the end. Families don't heal in one night. The wounds she left behind would take years to mend. And yet, for the first time, we had taken the first step together. After Lorraine stormed out, the hall felt strangely lighter, as though the air itself had shifted. Conversations started again in hushed tones. But it wasn't the same laughter as before. There was no cruelty laced through it, no mocking undertone. For once, the noise wasn't at Zia's expense. I sat with my daughter in my lap, brushing strands of hair from her damp cheeks. She leaned into me, her heartbeat slowing, her small body softening after carrying such heavy words. Travis knelt in front of us, his hands holding both of ours. "You were brave," he whispered to her, eyes glistening. "You did something tonight that most grown-ups never find the courage to do. You told the truth." Zia's lips quivered. "Will Grandma still hate me?" The question sliced through me, but I held her closer, forcing steadiness into my voice. "If she does, that's her choice. But it's not because of you. It's because she doesn't know how to love the way you deserve." Uncle Martin came over then, resting a gentle hand on Zia's shoulder. "Child," he said softly, "you've reminded all of us what family should mean. Don't let anyone take that away from you." She looked up at him wide-eyed, and for the first time all evening she smiled. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of apologies and awkward small talk. Aunts approached me with words they should have spoken years ago. Cousins whispered their admiration to Travis, calling him stronger than they'd ever known. It didn't erase the years of silence, but it cracked open a door that had long been sealed. When we finally left, Zia clutched the framed photo from the red box tightly against her chest. In the car, she whispered, "This is proof, right? Proof I'm yours forever." Travis kissed her temple, his voice breaking. "More than proof. It's our story, and no one can take it away." The drive home was quiet, the world outside glittering with holiday lights. But inside our little car, I felt something deeper than decorations and music. I felt freedom. In the days that followed, Lorraine didn't call. She didn't text. Her absence was deafening, but it also gave space for something new to grow. Relatives began reaching out to me, to Travis, even to Zia. Small gestures at first, a card, a phone call, an invitation for ice cream. They weren't perfect, but they were steps toward healing. One afternoon, Zia and I baked cookies together. She looked up at me, flour dusting her nose, and said, "Mama, do you think Grandma will ever be nice to me?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that you don't have to wait for someone else's love to feel whole. You already have ours, and that's enough." She grinned, then her gap-toothed smile brighter than any holiday light. "Yeah," she said. "I guess I do." And in that moment, I realized something I had missed all along. I had spent years trying to shield her from rejection, to soften the blows, to convince her she belonged. But what she needed wasn't my silence or my smoothing over it, was my truth. Our truth. That we were a family, whole and real, no matter who chose to deny it. Lorraine may never change. She may cling to her pride and her bitterness until the end. But her power is broken now. Because the one thing she tried to deny, the bond between a father and his daughter, between a mother and her child, proved stronger than her cruelty. And if you've ever been treated as less than by the people who should have loved you, most hear this: your worth isn't determined by their blindness. It's written in every moment of love you give and receive, in every act of courage to stand tall in the face of rejection. My daughter taught me that. She taught me that silence protects no one, but truth spoken bravely, even by the smallest voice, can shake an entire room. So tonight, as I share this story with you, I hope you carry that lesson too. You are enough. You belong, and no one can take that from you. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories and leave a comment below. I'd love to know, have you ever found your strength in the middle of betrayal?